Hi everyone, it's me. I am back, and this is going to be the first part of a short series where I just explain D&D, how to play it, how to make a character, but the first thing I'm going to kind of do is go over the different base races and classes that you can find in the player's handbook, which is very important to have if you're playing D&D. However, good thing, you can find PDFs of this, and the add-on that I find to be just kind of good to know about, Xanathar's Guide to Everything. Both can be found in PDF form for free, which is super nice if you have access to internet and the ability to download things just to be able to, know things. So this first video is going to go over races and classes, and I'm going to try to have timestamps in the description for if you just want to understand certain races or certain classes. And with the classes, because there are subclasses within those, and they are addressed in Player's Handbook and new ones in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, I will have Xanathars as the last group of subclasses and Player's Handbook as the first ones. So let's just kind of get into this. I'll just kind of briefly describe what each of the races are. So you have Dwarf, which are very small, they're very hardy, they're very good at metalworking. They're typically lawful good because they do exist within not really a hierarchy, but a very structured government, and depending on if you are a hill dwarf or a mountain dwarf, you either are more wise, which is better perception, you're better at using your senses, or you're stronger. You have higher strength, you're tougher, and that just has to do with subrace. Then you have elves, which are very old, very elegant, very intelligent, very lithe and willowy, and all that other very stereotypical elf stuff, I guess, where they just kind of exist on a higher realm than humans, would be the best way to describe it, I guess. Here there's you change your name when you get to a certain point in life where you go from child to adult, so there's definitely a break of, oh, you were a child, you are an adult. And the subclasses are like High Elf, where you are much more involved with magic, and it says here, and I quote, is haughty and reclusive, believing themselves to be superior to non-elves and even other elves. So these would be like the elves that kind of are very, I won't talk to you, you're a peasant to me kind of elves. You have wood elves, which are very good at sensing things around them, and sneaking around and stuff. These would typically fall into more of a hunter-esque sort of elf. And then you have dark elves, or drow, which have been banished from the upper world for worshipping an evil deity, and now are more suited for darkness than anything else. You have halflings, which are basically hobbits, except they're more apt to go adventuring. That's kind of it for a halfling. You have Lightfoot, which are very fast and light on their feet, and you have Stout, which are resistant to poison. And then you have humans, the very wide variety. There's no real subrace. I mean, there's a variety of different races within the human, but there's no actual subrace that affects any statistics or anything. You still get +1 to all stats, which will be explained when we get to character sheets and modifiers and all that stuff. Dragonborns, this is part of the exotic races. Dragonborns have dragon blood within them, and they look very much more dragon-esque. They don't really have wings, although there is a subclass of sorcerer where you can have dragon wings. They can breathe different elements. I believe it is poison, cold, acid, and fire. And lightning. Lightning's the other one. And those are the subraces. It's draconic ancestry, and it affects the way you look because it does affect your scale color. You have gnomes, which are inventors, tinkerers. They're very small. They're very good with their hands and figuring out like the history of things. You have forest gnomes, which are very good at stealth and being really fast and hard to track. And then you have rock gnomes, which are more of the like, oh, I tinker with literally everything. I'm a little bit harder to hit. You have half-elves too, which is the next one. They're seen as perfect, and I put that in quotes because obviously nothing's perfect, but like they definitely have some of the better stuff. Like you can choose one extra language, you have proficiency in 2 other skills, and these all will be more deeply explained when we get to character sheets. And I don't know, it's one of those things where they definitely seem better, and a lot of people would be more apt to go to half-elves. I do enjoy half-elves because I usually use them as a source of really dark backstories. I like to try to mess perfect things up, and this one was purposeful, which is interesting. You have half-orcs, which I think are... I haven't played a lot of half-orcs, but I really do want to, and I've made a few characters for half-orcs that I haven't been able to play because the way that they interact with society is very interesting. They're part orc, which are typically seen as very violent because their patron deity calls to their mind and causes them to be more apt for violence and for evil doing, and half-orcs are seen as dangerous because of that innate pull towards it, which they don't really control. Yeah, they're just really interesting, and that's all the races. And then you have classes, which there's 12 classes. Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard. And I'll kind of just briefly go over the description, important things to know, and then I'll start to get into each subclass. So Barbarians are described in the book as a fierce warrior of primitive background who can enter a battle range, and they're more strong with a higher constitution, which means that they hit really hard and they're really hard to kill. The subclasses are called, primal paths. Each subclass has a different kind of way of describing a subclass. You have things like Path of the Berserker, which means you just kind of go berserk. Really hard to hit, hits really hard, very violent. Path of the Totem Warrior, which I believe takes a lot of inspiration from the very stereotyped indigenous cultures of North America, because there are things like totem spirits, spirit animals. That's just a part of it. What are the other subclasses of this? You have Path of the Ancestral Guardian, where there is an ancestor that helps protect you and gives you extra power. Path of the Storm Herald, which you basically, instead of doing like Path of the Berserker, where when you attack and want to get a lot of damage, you literally just make yourself stronger. This one is, I decided to control storms through pure want, basically. Yeah, they learn how to make rage magic. That And then you have Path of the Zealot, which they pray to a deity with rage to make them more powerful, which is interesting, I guess. Then you have bards. These are, I'd usually say go for a bard or a fighter, depending on if you want to be a magic caster or just melee or weapons user. Bard is very easy to play and is very easy to kind of get into for magic. They use a lot of magic, and like they're just very simple and easy to understand. And they're exactly what you kind of think. If you think of like a bard, someone who plays music, it's that, but that music makes magic. Then you have all the colleges, which that's what these subclasses are called. You have the College of Lore, where you use your music and magic to tell tales of history. You have the College of Valor, which tells stories of heroes and like mighty wars and warriors and basically a lot of dead people who were seen as very strong and inspirational. And then you have College of Glamour, which definitely is like working on their stage presence. All of their work goes into stage presence, so much so that it comes to the point where there's something called Unbreakable Majesty, and your appearance permanently gains an otherworldly aspect that makes you look more lovely and fierce. Yeah. College of Swords is you start to become very good at sword fighting. That's all that is. And then a personal favorite of mine, because I love the dark angsty character thing, is College of Whispers, where they pretend to be of a different college and they manipulate people into giving them what they want. And also you get blades that cause psychic damage, which is super cool. Then you got Clerics. They're healers, and they heal people because of a deity that they pray to. It's very simple. They also do, at early levels, some of the most damage because they have access to spells that can cause a lot of damage. And these subclasses are called Divine Domains. So you have like Knowledge Domain, which would be you pray to deities that are more knowledgeable, and work more with known things that are like absolutely true. You have the Life Domain, which things that work with life. So this would be a lot of healers, bringing back the dead, things like that. Light Domain would be anything that has to do with light. These are all very simple. Nature Domain, anything that has to do with nature. Tempest Domain is anything to do with storms or storm deities. Trickery is any deities that work with trickery. And War is any deities that work with war. And then the ones here are Forge Domain, which are any deities that work with metal or creation, and then the Grave Domain, any deities that work with death or the line between life and death. And then we get to Druids, which are people who live in the forest, and they exist in the forest, and the forest has kind of become part of them, and they use kind of nature to make magic. What's the word? Subclasses are called Druid Circles. And you have Circle of Land, which it says here, safeguard ancient knowledge and rights through vast oral traditions. So I would say that these are people who protect the history of the area of land and nature and stuff. Circle of the Moon are guardians. They let's see. They haunt the deepest parts of the wilderness where they might go for weeks on end before crossing paths with another humanoid creature, let alone another druid. So these are protectors. Circle of the Moon are protectors, and they protect the forest. Circle of Dreams would be people who have ties to the Feywilds, which is the area where all the Fey live. And anything that kind of has to do with dreams or any dreamlike state. And then Circle of the Shepherd, which takes care of any creatures of the wild and of nature. And then it goes into beast shapes, because druids can transform into beasts, depending on their level and what they want to do. Then you have Fighter, which, as I said earlier, would be my recommendation for if you want to start with weapon fighting rather than magic. Mostly because they're very easy to kind of go through. They're very easy to use. They're fairly straightforward. And then you have martial archetypes. That's what these subclasses are called. And you have like Champion, which is a personal favorite because critical rolls can be from 18 to 20, which is another thing I'll get into when we start going over dice. Not character sheets, dice and the rolls of dice. And that will also kind of tie into more of gameplay and then also DMing or Dungeon Master. Battle Master, who is very good at different ways of fighting. This is where you'll have things like, what are they called? Maneuvers. This is where you'll have different maneuvers, different ways to fight and counteract and dodge attacks from enemies. Then you have Eldritch Knight, a knight that is magical and uses magic. And you also have Arcane Archer, and very specifically Archer, who uses magic. So it's Eldritch Knight, but uses archery and other long-distance weapons rather than typical swords or close melee weapons. You have Cavalier, which is mounted combat, so you would have an animal that you would ride on, usually a horse. And you also have the Samurai, which are it's self-explanatory. You are very, it says the Samurai features are fighting spirit, elegant courtier, tireless spirit, rapid strike, and strength before death. So it would be like very elegant, very strong, fight to the death. That's kind of that whole thing. You have monks, which I always explain as anyone who does Kung Fu and Kung Fu Panda. They live in fairly reserved areas and train using martial arts, and use, I think it's Ki is how it's pronounced in this. It's Chi, but with a K instead of CH. And they use that internal power to just be better at fighting, I guess. Or deflecting missiles. There's a spell called Magic Missiles where you make 3 missiles and you fire them. And monks are one of the very few classes that can catch them or deflect them and not be hurt by them. The Monistic Traditions is the subclass, and you have Way of the Open Hand, where you don't use any weapons, you only use your hands to fight and deflect. Way of the Shadow, which is subterfuge and stealth. Ninjas would definitely be Way of the Shadow. And Way of the Four Elements, which is you use Ki more than anything else to use magic that is influenced by by the 4 elements: fire, water, earth, air. And then you have Way of the Drunken Master, which you fight using the very unpredictable movements of a drunk person. And with the Kensai, they fight using weapons rather. It's basically the opposite of Way of the Open Palm. It's you fight with weapons rather than your hands, and you will use specific weapons meant for that. And then you have Way of the Sun Soul, where it's like Way of the Four Elements, except it's with light and the sun rather than elements. Then we got Paladin. Easiest way to describe this, cleric, but a fighter. There is a type of Oathbreaker Paladin, but that's in the Dungeon Master's Guide as a character rather than as an NPC idea rather than an actual character, and also they're, as I've heard, very, very strong, so I won't really go into it because they're a little complicated to go into from what I've read. They're very simple. They have sacred oaths instead of what clerics have, which is a deity that they pray to. Paladins make an oath to a deity rather than praying to a deity. So you have Oath of Devotion, which is justice, order, like, it's basically just a knight. When a knight pledges loyalty to a king. But this time it's to a deity. Oath of the Ancients, which, they give their oaths to usually fey deities, or, very old deities that are definitely seen as more dangerous or more, mystical than the newer ones. And you have Oath of Vengeance, which is, I will be violent. Very similar to Path of War. Oath of Conquest, which is pretty self-explanatory. Winning battles, winning wars, all that stuff. Oath of Redemption, which I guess I would probably use for characters who have done bad in their life and want to redeem themselves by being a paladin. Or want to help redeem others. Then you got Ranger, which is people who have lived in the wild and protect it. They're very good at archery, from what I know. They're very good at long distance, and they have usually some kind of animal with them or beast with them that helps them. They also can cast spells like Druids. There ends up not really being a lot of classes that don't have magic. I don't think there's any class that doesn't not use magic. At least there are choices where you can or cannot. These are the subclass is just called Ranger archetypes. You have Hunter, you hunt, Beastmaster, you tame beasts. This would be the one where you have a beast or something near you. Gloomstalker, they kind of travel through the darker areas of the world, and Horizon Walker, where they walk to seek magic. And then you have Monster Slayer. You just hunt monsters. You just hunt the monsters. Rogue, people like to say rogues are very overpowered when they get to level 20 because they only take half damage from anything by the time they're at level 20, and also they can sense anything that's invisible near them, and they can basically hide at any point in time that they want to. But I just think they're really fun to kind of play with, especially if you want a very angsty backstory, because rogues are perfect for this, along with one other class, in my personal opinion. They're very sneaky. They're made to be sneaky. Roguish archetypes, that's the subclasses. You have Thief. You're very good at stealing, getting away from places. Assassin, you're very good at poisoning things and hiding in plain sight. And Arcane Trickster is just the magic subclass. You have Inquisitive, which is very good at, like, these would usually be spies. They're very good at digging out information that they really want. You have Mastermind, which is very good at influencing people and getting them to spill their deepest, darkest secrets. And Swashbuckler, another sword one. You got more swords. More swords. And then Sorcerer is the other one that you can make a really angsty backstory, because I've heard it described as someone who's not supposed to exist. Because magic is like the fabric of reality, and someone being born with magic when they're not supposed to be is like that fabric being torn and then sewn back together in a very odd, misshapen way. The players, like, these also are probably one of the worst when it comes to magic, but they're really fun to play when it comes to the Sorceress Origins, which is the subclass. You have Draconic Bloodline, where you take on a more Draconic-esque form. Maybe not so much as a Dragonborn, but you definitely do get, like, scales, and you look more like a dragon than you would have if you didn't. Like, you have Draconic ancestry, you have resilience, you might not actually be able to breathe those elements, but you have resistance. And you get dragon wings, which is what I was talking about earlier. This is the one subclass where you can get wings and fly with wings, other than a special other race called the Aarakocra, but that's not in the official books that you probably would be reading. And then you have wild magic, where the DM can randomly say, alright, you cast a spell, roll on the wild magic surge table, and you roll a D100, which I will get into during playing the game and using a character and stuff. Or if you roll a natural 1, which is a critical fail. And there's not much else with the main ones, but here in Xanathars, you actually get some really cool stuff. Like, you get Divine Soul, which means that the deities help you out, or you got your magic from a holy place. You got Shadow Magic, which is you literally walk the line between life and death. It's one of the few subclasses where you actually get a quirk depending on this, because you aren't 100% alive, but you also aren't 100% dead. And then you get Storm Sorcery. You got the magic from storms. You got the magic from the storms. You got more like these are clerics, except cooler, in my opinion. You make a pact with some kind of deity, and that deity gives you magic. These are called pact boons, or otherworldly patrons. So you have like Archfey, which is you make a pact with Fey, or a creature from Feywild, and these existed before any sort of mortal was born or created, so these are very ancient deities. You have the Fiend, which are evil deities, and you have the Great Old One, which are very, very, very old. This would have like Cthulhu, which is kind of the only one that I really know of these. These would be Lovecraftian entities. They would definitely lean more towards those. And then you have a few extra ones here, such as the Celestials. So this would be from a very high deity. These would be very holy deities. And then Hexblade is something from, it's a sentient magic rather than a deity. It's more of like I am a magic that exists and has a mind and can think for itself, rather than like an actual being. Does that make sense? Then you got wizards. These people read so much that they got magic from the readings. They have spell books, and they have arcane traditions. All the traditions from this one are the different schools of magic. Abjuration, which is protective spells. Conjuration, making things. Divination, looking inside the mind. Enchantment, influencing the mind. Evocation, this would be like damage spells. Anything that makes fire or ice or lightning. Illusion, anything that makes something look there that isn't there. Necromancy, exploring the dead. Transmutation is changing one thing into another. But then you got some other ones. You've got like war magic. It is war magic. That's the only one. You only get war magic. And that's kind of it for classes and races. Thank you.